Hello, everybody, and welcome to another iconic episode of A Good Lawyer podcast, part of the EIL Network, Excellence in Lawyering. I am Esteban Stephen Garcia, your non lawyer, coast to coast opinion host. And this is where I delve into the captivating world of brilliant legal minds, such as with our guest today, in hopes of enriching yours. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a great one for you today. Our guest today founded the DARBOUZE, and I hope I'm not butchering that.
Perfect.
Uh, she founded the DARBOUZE Law Group back in 2010, earned her bachelor's degree in psychology from the Geneva College before receiving her Juris Doctor from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, where she was involved with the Christian Legal Society. And now she uh, runs and oversees, as executive director of the Christian Legal Aid of Pittsburgh. And I hope I got that right.
Oh,
But there's
100%
so
accurate.
many,
Yeah.
so many layers to this wonderful woman. I can't wait to dive on in here. So, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Lauren Darbouze to the podcast. Lauren, welcome to A Good Lawyer.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting to be a part of.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours. Trust me on that. Tell folks a little bit about your backstory. As we say here in Texas, where are you sprung from and what got you steered in the direction of law?
Oh, I wish I had a really inspirational story. Like I'd always wanted to be a lawyer, but it just kind of fell into place. And looking back at the puzzle, all of the puzzle pieces were there. It just took some time to put it all together. Like you said, I graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology, and there's not much that you can do with just a bachelor's degree in psychology. So I knew I needed to do some additional education. And my dad said, well, why not try law school? I think you'll like it. And he was right. And I just kind of fell into family law along the way.
That is fantastic. We talked off air about uh, the unfortunate need for family law lawyers, but the reality is that we need each and every one of y'all because that's where we're at, right? That's our reality of people's, what's the saying? When I do turns into I don't, right?
Right, right. Yeah,
Uh,
it's
but
unfortunate.
I wanted to ask you, uh, or let me ask it this way. Let's talk about the DIVORCE that nobody sees coming.
That's a really good question. How do you deal with it when it's not your idea and certainly not the way that you expected your future to look, right?
Mhm.
My counsel to everyone is to try to find the silver lining. What can I do with this choice that was not necessarily mine, but to improve where I go from here? It's really important to dive into personal growth, to find, the best case scenario in every situation where it is a very difficult process. It is a very challenging time for everyone who goes through it. There's no question. But it can also be the best possible outcome, unfortunately.
We've heard horror stories of how someone waited too late, if you will, uh, to get out of a bad situation. But that's not always the norm, is it? It's usually other things. And I wanted to ask a follow-up question on that. Can a marriage truly unravel without the other spouse knowing it? Am I asking that right?
Yeah, I think it absolutely can. I think some people unfortunately lack insight into how things did fall apart. And that can be part of the personal growth on the other side of it is to look inward and figure out what do I learn from this? But yeah, absolutely. I think it can unravel without on one side knowing, what they did wrong. And maybe they didn't do anything wrong. Maybe it was just a compatibility issue.
What do you say about, and maybe based on your experience and your knowledge of the situations that you've seen or been a part of, the mental health aspect of people in these, let's just call them, some of them can be toxic relationships, right? Some of them can be just really bad situations. On the mental health side of things, have you encountered where folks just don't want to leave because they're either, I don't even know if codependent is the right word, but I guess the abusiveness is the only thing they know. And to leave that, they'd be in foreign territory.
Right, and the unknown is so terrifying that people do stay. And that's, I think, where as divorce professionals, we have the privilege to come in and help them put the pieces back together. This is something that people come into my office thinking that they have to have everything all figured out from day one to the very end. What's this going to mean for my life? And my counsel is always, let's take it one day at a time, figure out what the most urgent issue is, and tackle that one issue at a time. It makes it much less overwhelming to try to figure out how to navigate and move forward.
Yeah, and I think it's scary for them.
Absolutely.
Either side, right? And I think maybe the mentality, they're thinking, had the other told me this 6 months ago, we wouldn't be getting divorced today, kind of mentality.
Not as often as you would think. I think a lot of people, by the time they meet with me, have a good idea of what's coming next in terms of the marriage breaking up. It's not very often that we see people completely blindsided. It happens for sure, but it's much more common that the relationship has been falling apart and neither one wanted to really address it, um, rather than a complete surprise.
Right. It's rarely a complete surprise, right? It's either selective amnesia or something to the effect where I'm going to stay no matter what, or I'm going to try to make this work no matter what. So let's talk about the silent killer. In your experience, what is the silent killer of a marriage?
I think lack of communication is probably the biggest issue. The biggest cause of divorce is lack of communication, and it can be start out small issues and just end up in a situation where the parties don't talk to each other at all anymore, and that's really the worst case scenario. Um,
What about infidelity, financial stress, as you mentioned so eloquently, poor communication? Or is it something that maybe has been brewing for years?
Right. I mean, I think the lack of communication is something that builds and builds and builds to other issues coming into it, like infidelity or financial strains. And if you're just not talking on a basic level, that complicates everything, right? Um, I don't think necessarily infidelity it can be viewed as the relationship killer in a nutshell. It always comes from somewhere else. One side's needs are not being met, so they look outside the relationship rather than communicate about what they're wanting. Um, there's always more to the problem than just usually more than just the act of infidelity.
And it seems from what my research has shown me is that in a weird way, right, from a layperson here, that it seems that the infidelity can sometimes be overlooked or fixed, but the other factors carry much more weight. Am I way off on that?
No, I think if you're not willing to fix the underlying issues, that yes, you can get past the infidelity, but the relationship is going to continue to be broken.
Yeah, the trust factor, correct.
Definitely.
And one of the other areas that you and your law firm handle, and I would assume on a daily basis, is a thing called PFA. And could you tell folks, number one, what is PFA and what does it mean to each spouse involved or person
Sure. So
involved?
PFAs are protection from abuse orders, and they're not necessarily limited to a marital relationship. It can be former dating relationships, it can be family members. I've had cases where a relative will file against a relative. It's not necessarily just spouse versus spouse. And they're meant to protect victims of abuse. Victims of physical abuse are the most common recipients of a PFA, but there can be other types of abuse the court will consider so long as the victim's fear is rational. If they legitimately feel threatened by the other party, to where their safety could be compromised if the court doesn't intervene, that's when a PFA is granted.
And take us through the first 24 or 48 hours once a PFA is granted. What does it mean for the other or both parties involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think this is probably very state specific. But in Pennsylvania, a plaintiff can file for a PFA without notice to the other side. So it's a completely ex parte proceeding, meaning the other side doesn't have the opportunity to present any side of their story. This is a petition that's granted specifically based on what the plaintiff is telling the court. Typically in Pennsylvania, those are granted out of an abundance of caution. The court kind of takes everything the plaintiff is saying at face value. And so long as it's not completely ridiculous, that they have a valid fear, that temporary order for abuse or protection from abuse is going to be granted. From there, the defendant is served with the PFA petition, and they're not permitted to have any contact with the victim until they come in for a final hearing, which is usually within 7 to 10 days of the original petition. At that point, they get to present their side of the story and either explain what happened from their perspective or um, present any evidence as to why there isn't a need for the court's protection for the plaintiff.
And there is a faction of people out there that believe that the protection order, if you will, is just a piece of paper. Is it just a piece of paper?
It is not. It offers very valid protection. Certainly, there are the scary type of defendants that view it that way and won't stop with any kind of threat of criminal charges hanging over their heads. And unfortunately, that does happen. But no, it offers very real protection to the victims of abuse. That if there is any contact from their abuser, that they have the option to reach out to law enforcement and have them, swiftly act on their behalf.
I really want people listening to understand that the word contact can be a myriad of different things, correct?
Absolutely.
Can you go into some of those?
Sure. So it's not just direct contact, right? Like a phone call or stopping over at their house. It can be having your mom reach out is indirect contact that also violates the protection, or having a third party reach out on your behalf, or you can reach out on social media and that's a violation of a PFA. There are any number of means of contact that you're protected from if you have a PFA order.
I call them like the spy calls or like a million texts in a period of an hour. I'm exaggerating, but something like that would be a violation as well, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where does mediation come in to this whole scenario of things? Not just the protection orders items here and things that people have to file for, but what about before all of this gets to this point, this boiling point? Does mediation really help in these situations?
That's a good question. And possibly state specific also. For PFAs, the way that the court typically schedules those in Pennsylvania gives the parties an opportunity to try to work out a resolution before the final hearing starts. And sometimes they are able to agree that this would be best if we have, mutually no contact with each other for a specific period of time, and that can be put into a final order. So most counties in Pennsylvania do allow the parties an opportunity to try to work it out. Um, some cases that's a good option. Sometimes it's not. If you have a defendant who, like you said, thinks it's just a piece of paper and isn't really afraid of the process, then it's best to take the issue in front of the judge and get the judge to issue a final order with a finding of abuse.
And is Pennsylvania an alimony state?
Oh, that's a very good question. It can be. There are a number of factors that the court will look at prior to awarding alimony, like length of marriage. Was one party a homemaker and completely gave up their career to the point where they're going to have a really hard time moving forward? It's a very case specific analysis that the court makes. But yes, Pennsylvania can be an alimony. It's not automatic, but it is an alimony state.
That is really interesting because I, just layperson here again, think that it's either yes or no, right? So it's very interesting to know. So they take it on a case by case basis.
Yeah.
Because you could wind up being owed alimony. What other areas of law do you predominantly cover there at the DARBOUZE law firm?
I would say we have a significant amount of custody work that we do, child
Mhm.
custody. That's kind of my favorite area of law to practice in, which sounds strange to say, but I enjoy it. I think, one of the benefits a family law attorney has is helping a family figure out what is our new normal going to look like and how do we keep the child's best interest in focus while we figure out what the next chapter looks like.
What do you say to these adults, I'll call them, slash parents, who have this idea that they're so glad that the children are young right now because they're not going to remember any of this turmoil that's going on with the divorce or the fighting and all that? What do you say to people like that? Because I think kids are a lot more smarter than what some parents give them credit for. Kids remember all this stuff. What's been your experience?
That's a really great question. I mean, yes, kids are incredibly perceptive and they definitely sense the tension, even when parents think they're doing a really great job of covering it up. Um,
Mhm.
can kids move forward in a healthy way from divorce? Absolutely, but it depends on the parents acting together to do that. I don't think one parent can do it alone, frankly. They have to be on the same page and keeping their child's best interests at the forefront of everything that they do, in order to make the next step a healthy one for the kids. It takes a lot to have a healthy co-parenting relationship, and you have to put a lot of yourself aside and think what's really best for my kid at all times, not what did this person do to me that is terrible that I just can't get past. You have to.
How bad has, without obviously naming names or specific situations, but how bad has child custody gotten for you in your experience as far as a particular case or situation?
Yeah. So, I mean, custody in Pennsylvania is something that either parent can litigate until the child is 18. And I've had cases where we're fighting over a 17-year-old in court, which is crazy
Wow.
because at that point, they have jobs, they have extracurricular activities. They don't care what parent's supposed to have them on any given night. They've got lives of their own, and to be still heavily litigating over a child at that point in their life, that's essentially their entire childhood that you've been fighting and now wasted because they only get one. Um, so, I mean, that's unfortunate that that is the state of the law in Pennsylvania, but it happens.
If you could change one thing about family law, you were given a wand for one day and they said, Lauren, any law you want to change about the family law code or however it's referred to there in Pennsylvania, what would that be?
I think I would make the process faster. If there was a way to make it faster, I think families hang out in limbo. You know, the divorce is filed or the custody is filed, and then it takes years sometimes for there to be a resolution. And not necessarily because of anything on their end, but because of the court's calendar and because of excessive continuances and things along those lines, that it can take a really long time for them to be able to close this chapter in their lives and move forward. And I don't think that's necessarily the healthiest route for anybody involved, but that's the process once they decide to dive into it.
Can the law heal the hurt?
No, no, I don't think so. Only the parties can if they put in the work. And that's, I guess, the privilege of working in family law is that we don't just see the law as black and white. We have to be counselors to our clients and sit and listen to, okay, I hear what you're telling me is the most important thing to you right now, and how can I help with that? Um, the law isn't necessarily tailored to help people in that way, but as family law attorneys, we can kind of bridge the gaps where the law fails them.
And from when you started this journey to be an incredible lawyer, but from then until today, August the 6th, 2026, what does the law mean to Lauren Darbouz today?
Oh, I mean, it's my passion. I've devoted my entire career to the family law side of things. I can't imagine any other career. It's more than a career to me. It's a calling to work with broken families and help move them forward. It's yeah, it's just that, a calling.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And real close second to that question is where do you see any changes coming forward with family law in the next 5 years?
Mm. Well, I think in terms of changes to family law, as technology develops, we develop more issues with family law, but also more um, ways to improve the law. I think, you know, the use of AI has been really interesting in litigation. We have a lot of people who use Chat GPT to draft pleadings on their own, but then they show up in court and don't really
Yeah.
know what to do from there. Um, so I think it's interesting to watch the use of AI interplay kind of with family law, and lawyers don't have to worry. We still are needed.
Absolutely.
Like,
I've said this before. The where AI, in my view, it's great, right? I like to say that every day in case one day they turn on us. I want them to know
yeah,
I was a fan.
yeah.
But with respect to and regarding the law, I think, and I don't want any paralegals to hate me. I think maybe one day they may be able to do a paralegal's job, maybe legal assistant as well.
I don't
I
know
do
about
see.
that. Our main paralegal in our office is a better lawyer than all of us.
I
So.
I believe that. I don't want them to hate me. I believe that, and I know some great paralegals too. But as far as like court reporting, I think it would be able to do that. And I know a lot of great court reporters. I don't think it'll ever replace 12 men and women on a jury. I don't think it'll ever replace. It for sure will never replace a lawyer. Judges, Jury's still out on that.
That's interesting. That's a very interesting concept. I'd never thought about that.
AI will never know what it's like to love or what love feels like. It'll never know what hurt feels like. Although it's trying to learn every day desperately, I know that, but it will never get there. But with the family law aspect, I was kind of where my mind was going within the next 5 years or what have you, was that spouses may try to use AI for bad for the other side, for their partner. You follow me? They may try to create something that's just not there. And I'm wondering if the legal community has thought about that, like how to combat obviously bogus, what looks to be real,
Real
something
evidence
bogus.
that's definitely
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, because I mean, so much of if you get to a trial in family law, so much of winning is documentation. Can it be fabricated through AI? I suppose that's possible.
Scary, huh?
It is a little bit terrifying.
If anyone in the greater state of Pennsylvania ever finds themselves in need of a family law expert such as yourself, how can they reach you, Lauren?
Well, through our website is probably the easiest way to find us. It's darbouzelaw.group.com. And we do work throughout Pennsylvania. We've got 4 offices now and continue to grow. So it's a
Yeah.
very exciting area to be in.
Well, we think the world of you and we want to continue to have you on. So we're going to be asking you to come back on a whole bunch. So hopefully
I would love that.
this wasn't too painful of an experience.
Oh,
We
thank you
loved
for having
having
me.
you. We loved having you on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Unfortunately, family law is something that touches everyone, whether you're personally going through a divorce or your sister is and you have questions. I mean, it's definitely a deeply personal area of law. So we're happy to help however we can.
Well, thank you so much. If you don't mind standing by for 2 seconds, I got to say goodbye to the audience and I'll be right back with you.
Of course.
Awesome. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Lauren DARBOUZE. Folks, there's a lot going on in the world today, a lot of doom and gloom. You see it on TV, social media. You're even seeing it in the streets every day. So do yourselves a favor. Get out there and love somebody today. I will see y'all up the road. I love y'all. I will forever. Bye.